All right. Well, I want to welcome everyone to another VDAO, P2P learning experience. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be here with us and to go on this learning journey together. VDAO is committed to making these peer-to-peer educational sessions available to everyone and providing space where experts can share their wisdom, experience, and knowledge with the community. Today, we are lucky to have Steve Boniwell, who has taken time out of his busy schedule. Steve is a VDAO contributor and co-founder of PSKL. He's here with us today for a second time. Actually, he did a peer-to-peer thing last
Community call.
year. Well, yeah,
Hmm.
was it April? Yeah.
Yeah, it was a community call, so it was just a quick 10-minute hi to everyone, but keen to get into more detail today.
Yeah, this is going to be a great kind of follow up to that. People can go ahead and check that out on our YouTube. I'll share a link in the Discord as well for that previous episode. But yeah, Steve will be leaning into his experience and knowledge on water cycles, unpowered tech for regenerating ecosystems, and more. And just before I hand it over to Steve, just a few housekeeping items to attend to first. One is this is a recorded session and it will be shared on our YouTube channel and other various social media platforms. I encourage folks to keep their cameras on as it offers a more engaging experience. And I love to see everybody's beautiful smiles on screen. If you have any questions while Steve is presenting, please use the in-call chat and put your questions in all caps. It just makes it easier for us to pick it up. Again, please don't be shy in the chat or, in the conversations as they start to happen. Get to know one another, say hello to people you recognize, welcome those that you don't, share where you're from, share your thoughts as we go along. As long as we're making an effort to connect and turn strangers into friends, we can't build epic things if we don't work together. So, Steve may also pause throughout his presentation to give people opportunity to share thoughts or ask questions. Or he may decide to save that for the end. In either case, there is a raise hand function at the bottom of your screen. If you look at the reactions button in there, you'll find a raise hand, and that will allow us to have a smoother experience when the time comes. Lastly, enjoy the session and don't forget to keep tabs on our Luma calendar and our Discord for more events. We try to host 3 or 4 of these each month. But hey, Steve, take it away. I've done enough talking. Maybe you can kick things off. Give us a quick introduction of yourself.
Cool, thanks, guys. Yeah, I'm Steve with PSKL Water for All, co-founder. Um, I'm far north Queensland, west of Cairns. I've got a landscaping and earthworks background. Um, Sorry, I'm just setting this one up. Can you guys see that now? It's popping up. Cool.
Yep, looks good.
Um, yeah, so my thoughts today, we've got an Australian land regeneration company. We work to reduce drought, fire, flood, and changing climates. We use unpowered technology to accelerate ecosystems, and there's a compounding function in that. So with this systems thinking lens, like understanding Earth systems thinking in all the different links and having a broader systems perspective, we think there's big potential across all sorts of domains and industry, not just in the Earth systems thinking, but also others as well. So today we've got an evolving thesis at PSKL, and I wanted to test it out on you guys, and I want to get your ideas and input and feedback, and we can have a discussion at the end. There's a bit of a sequential logic to it, so I think I'll present the case, and then I would love to get discussion and debate and whatever else, however you guys feel it goes. Um, so just stressing that a lot of our thinking today, generally, not necessarily in this community, but we compartmentalize climate, productivity, economy, energy, etc. But they are all super independent, super dependent and interconnected on each other. So, going to go through that thesis today. I'll talk about a bit of a broader context initially, then I'll jump into what we're doing, and then we'll have discussion. So the way that we view it is we see as a generalization three possible climate and energy futures. Green growth, the green transition, is the assumption that that green technology, renewables, will enable us to live our energy intensive lives, and there's very little disruption to our lives. In fact, that green transition is more of a green energy addition. There hasn't been much transitioning away from any power substitution. It's just been adding, and energy demand is growing and growing. Degrowth is another narrative that's got a bit of support, but that's an energy descent future. We all make do with less. I think that's got some major challenges, and we can jump into that. And we're proposing a regrowth paradigm, which lots of you guys would be aligned with. So that's all about self-replicating living systems. And we think that unpowered technology, accelerating those living systems, has a really massive role long term. So here's are the unspoken challenges that we haven't heard of. Have you guys got all our faces there? I like to see people's faces, but I like to see the slides as well. Do you guys have both? Okay. Great. That's good. So Green Growth, Professor Nate Hagens has the Great Simplification podcast, and all these narratives of renewables will save the day and carbon is exclusively the problem and things like that. He sort of expands on those narratives, and he adds complexity to them. He says, yes, this is true, but here's a lot of complexity to it. So he talks about renewables being rebuildable, not renewable. They're not living organisms. So he stresses the importance of engineering and manufacture really intentionally so that they can be rebuilt in a cost-effective way. Currently, as a generalization overall, for all the materials we make, only 15% of things are recycled. So there's obviously going to be limitations moving forward in a circular economy, whatever that means. And to do it in a cost-effective way is also super important. So there's big challenges there that aren't acknowledged. Simon Michaud's research is super key. Not sure if you've heard of him, but it's definitely shaped my view. So Simon Michaud is an Australian geometallurgist. He does like mining audits of what key minerals are in the ground and what's possible. So he did a research paper, the assessment of the extra capacity required of alternative energy electrical systems to completely replace fossil fuels. It's a really comprehensive study. I'll include this link in the chat. And basically the answer is there's not enough key minerals for the first generation of a global electrified fleet. So Simon presents to the UN, he presents to various governments. So he has a platform, but that's definitely not the narrative that we're hearing. The narrative that we're hearing is electrify everything and we're all sweet. So that's not the case. So it's really shaped my thinking there. And then there's also narratives on AI is infinite knowledge, robotics is infinite humans, and the electrification of everything. I agree that we're in incredible times with incredible capability, but there's still limitations and massive challenges that we are in for within the next decade or two, I believe. A degrowth paradigm, it's not proactive enough. If we're at this point now and we've got all these challenges, we've got incredible biodiversity loss when the majority of animal mass is, by a large extent, is livestock or, wild populations of everything have just been absolutely decimated. Insects, birds, it's really horrific. So who wants to maintain this level of dysfunction? It's not proactive enough. And I also wonder about enforcement in a degrowth paradigm. There must be regulation, there must be centralized control. Someone may say, well, I don't want to give up my power and energy and materials. You do your degrowth thing. I'm going to have an army. I'm going to have energy, etc. So that's why incentive is really important, and that's why we're talking about a regrowth paradigm, self-replicating living systems. And this is where I think a lot of our material focus needs to focus on regeneration of the ecosystem, and the materials come from there. Talking about the lifespan of these things. So oil, coal, natural gas, that's all fossilized sunlight, basically. So it's a finite resource. We know it has pollution. It has lots of benefits as well. It has pros and cons. Obviously, pollution being finite and having an effect on the atmosphere is very obvious. Renewables are finite as well. We don't understand that from the current narrative. It's sort of expected to be infinite, or we're going to mine asteroids or whatever. So talking about the lifespan of that, Simon Michaud talks about, that could be decades or a couple of decades before we're really hitting those boundaries. Whereas a regrowth paradigm, we're talking about the lifespan of the sun if we're stewarding the landscapes for more life and more diversity. That's an incredible difference between decades or hundreds of years and huge amounts of time. So that's where our consciousness and tools need to be pointed in this regeneration direction. Some people don't appreciate where we are in the climate space. Pretty much all prominent climate scientists who are not pushing a fossil fuel agenda, that they've been doing genuine good climate analysis for decades. They're saying we need to be experimenting with geo-engineering. Also saying we need to reduce fossil fuels, obviously. But this is quite extreme, and that just shows the point that we're at. So here's potential methods of solar geoengineering. If they're all involving the atmosphere, with putting things into the atmosphere to reflect solar energy, making clouds, etc. One of my key points is let's restore ecosystems instead, because they have mechanisms that do this, that make low, thick solar radiation reflective clouds, and at low altitudes they create rain, and we get all the benefits of an ecosystem. So there's a paradigm change that needs to happen there. Another challenge in the climate model space is that they've been getting it wrong. They've been basically underestimating where things are heading. Things are accelerating faster than that. Dave Borlace, again, I'll share this link with you so you guys can check out these interviews and scientific papers. He has a YouTube channel, Just Have a Think. It's really good. One of the challenges is water and cloud dynamics are so changeable, happen so quickly comparative to these gases that stay in the atmosphere a lot longer and a lot more evenly spread. So that's a challenging climate dynamics. Also, water is the most abundant greenhouse gas. Not many people realize that, and it has the strongest influence on heat dynamics. So atmospheric dynamics isn't all about water. It's all about all of the greenhouse gases, and it's also about the whole Earth system as well. So that's not talked about enough. There is a growing understanding of that, but it's the interaction of all of them that's really important. So Anastasia Makrieva is the biotic pump co-originator. The biotic pump is a mechanism where forests draw moisture in from the coast. It's got to do with pressure differences and temperature. So in that way, somewhere like the Amazon can have coastal moisture drawing in every day, and it's recycling that water multiple times. Whereas if you have a desert on the coast, you have a high pressure heat dome effect, and that is preventing low pressure moisture from moving inland. So her assessment is that climate and water dynamics are too complex for computer models at the moment. So therefore, I think we just need to act on this, on these elements without having the full understanding of how it works. So water is unique. It plays a key role in all life. It has a moderating effect in that it create ecosystems. And one thing we think about is there really water scarcity? Because we have the same amount of water that we have for eons. We have rising atmospheric moisture. A warming atmosphere holds more moisture. We have rising sea levels. And on land, in some places, we have water scarcity. So the question is, how do we get atmospheric moisture down? How do we shock absorb that and store it? And how do we reduce sea level rise? The answer is ecosystems on the land. We need to steward forests, grasslands, wetlands, and get that water where it should be. All climate extreme events are hydrological events as well. We have drought, fire, flood, cyclones. They're all related to heat, pressure, temperature, water cycles. It's all interconnected. So water does play a key role in enabling that change. It's a fantastic short video, which I will. Are you familiar with the biodeck pump before? Have you seen anything on that? No? Yep, cool. I'll leave it as a link, but it is just a short clip and it's really good. Another key one that people in our space get excited about, as well as the biotic pump, is bioprecipitation. So before we were talking about geoengineering, there's a whole lot of aerosols that are cloud condensation nuclei for moisture. It needs something to bind to. One in particular is a bacteria, Pseudomonas syringae, and it is a cloud condensation nuclei much more efficiently than any of these man-made aerosols, cloud seeding stuff, or other things that they're proposing. So it's a natural thing in the ecosystem. It makes clouds at lower altitudes, and it's able to make clouds at higher temperatures, at warmer temperatures. So it makes clouds more easily. So the result of having an ecosystem with these bacteria and all these other many aerosols that it produces is more frequent rainfall and less severe rainfall. So the atmospheric water doesn't build up. It holds less energy. This is a recent one that I found really profound. So it's some research by Rob DeLay and Peter Bunyard. They're doing some research in the forest, and just reading this one out here, I'll just read it out. Sorry, I'll just minimize myself here. But we calculate that the water vapor transport of evapotranspired latent heat from the forest canopy to the upper troposphere and its subsequent irradiation to space as infra-electromagnetic radiation may have brought about a cooling at least 100 times and possibly as much as 200 times greater than the cooling from the biomass forming its significant carbon sink. So what does that mean? That means that the cooling from the forest in transpiration and the phase changes in water and its effect in putting heat back into space is 100 to 200 times more than the carbon sequestration of that same part of forest. So that's incredible. We think of ecosystems as carbon sequestrers and soil, but it's actually this water mechanism and this cooling that the forest is providing that is just off the charts in a rainforest. So now we get to what we're up to. So unpowered technology accelerating ecosystems. So this will give you an idea of what we're up to.
How can deserts be transformed rapidly into rainforest? Deserts have rare rain events and can experience extreme runoff when it finally does rain. Evaporation is very high. We can capture extreme rain runoff in long swales and store it in a dam. We can then release the water to a fuelless pump that pumps water to higher water storage. The pump is powered by water. A percentage is pumped and the majority is discharged. The pump can be turned on and off the high flow, unpowered evaporation activated valve. This means that the discharged pump water is never too much for the soil or plants. The valve doesn't need electricity, internet, or Wi-Fi. It is a reliable, low-tech innovation, making it ideal for remote sites and tough conditions. The pump is self-regulating and self-priming. By providing regular moisture at appropriate rates over large areas, plus fuelless pumping, we can rehydrate and regenerate deserts. We can increase infiltration time by 100. This means pioneer plant species can start growing and soil can be improved. The rapid improved water cycle will help regenerate at the fastest rate possible. This enables supercharged plant succession. Rapid recharge of groundwater with rain improves groundwater quality and raises the water table of the surrounding area. Fresh water is less dense and sits on top of the poorer quality water. Trees and vegetation can also regulate the water table and salinity. The best place to store water, store carbon, and grow food is in the soil.
Yeah, so that's a basic idea of a strategy, maximum infiltration. You'll note a couple of elements. There's the gravity irrigation, that once you pump water, you can move that around. It also has a extreme weather shock absorbing event. So in the last property I was on, we had lots of slopes that had 80% runoff on the water catchment. So when you get a rain event of 100 mil, 200 mil, there's just massive amounts of runoff in a dam that is rising and falling depending on when the pump's happening. Instead of just the water going over the spillway the whole time, you've got this reservoir that can fill up. So that's useful where you have a prolonged wet season of months rather than just a desert that may have very rare rain events. So the pump is self-regulating and self-priming, meaning it can handle different water flows and it can start and stop itself. Unlike a ram pump that some of you guys may have heard of, you need to prime that, and it has a lot less capability in pumping to, Bunyip pump can pump to higher head heights. We developed an unpowered evaporation activated valve that's a MVP that we've combining with the pump. You saw that in the animation. The focus there is to start and stop the pump depending on evaporation conditions on site. If it's raining, you don't want to be putting extra water into the landscape. You don't want to have anaerobic conditions for the trees. So we were looking at a unpowered method for that and thought it'd be fantastic for remote areas and less maintenance. So one of the aims this year is to be experimenting with those two together. You'll also see that the suction pipe, that small little pipe, drawing the water, and the input water, the delivery water, the supply water, sorry, and the suction pipe, they can be modified. So your suction pipe drawing the water up, that can go directly into the supply water, or it could go elsewhere. So you could be using polluted water to pump fresh water just by moving this suction pipe around, which is a really interesting application. So one of the key understandings is that the water aspect is multiplying and compounding year on year. Just say you had a 5-fold increase in water availability per year, and then that compounds year on year on year. But you also have all these other aspects, like soil structure is multiplying and compounding. You've got groundwater. As you're raising groundwater, the fresh water is less dense, as the video was saying, and it's improving the groundwater quality. It's on top of the harder, more brackish water. So that's a massive productivity gain. Water quality is super important for productivity. Soils need the right amount of moisture. The difference between a heavy clay soil and a clay soil with beautiful structure can be 100-fold difference. It can be 2 millimeters an hour infiltration compared to 200 millimeters an hour infiltration. And I did some of these tests at my previous property, and the infiltration tests were quite amusing because it was just like pouring water into a hole. There's just so many macro pores. It's just so it's great fun to do. Equally, fungi, fungal mycelium, the water and nutrient efficiency, mycologists talk about a 700-fold increase. So just emphasizing that water is the catalyst and the potential, but there's all these other things happening simultaneously, including drought, fire, and flood resilience. Drought, you've got better soil structure, it's infiltrating more. Fire, you've got green growth for longer. You've got more fungi that's breaking down the fire fuel load instead of going up in smoke. And drought, obviously, there's more moisture retention. So excitement there. So maximum infiltration is one of multiple applications that we see. It's sort of, as much as anything, it's the concept of using this unpowered basic tech accelerating ecosystems that we're more broadly developing a service around. So in that instance of maximum infiltration, get rid of that thing there. Oh. Sorry, guys, I'm going the wrong way now. So in that case, we were putting water into the landscape. We were looking to infiltrate as much as was possible in a healthy way. Here's a different context. This is called a water relay, is this strategy. It was developed, we did a conceptual design for the weather makers on the Sinai Peninsula. They have a desert landscape. They want to regreen the whole Sinai and change weather patterns there. So we did a conceptual design and presented to them. Because there's such high evaporation there and the water there wasn't there for long, they wanted to make use of it while it was there. We developed another strategy. So we called that a water relay and lifeline. Instead of putting water into the swale and infiltrating it, it was about capturing the discharge water, and then that flows to another small concrete structure that also captures the discharge water. And at each point, you can pump water to higher elevation from these concrete structures, and you can also add water in at any of these concrete structures as well. So there's a whole range of applications there. Say you had 10 pumps in series with these basic concrete structures, you can pump the discharge water 9 times. In that context of the North Sinai, we were also looking at direct bore well recharge. Instead of spreading the water out on the landscape and having evaporation taking it away, we thought it's better to get it in the ground and raise the groundwater table. They also had troubles with saltwater incursion because people are using the groundwater and depleting it, and then the salt water on the coast moves in. So I think that's a really interesting application. Fuelless pumped hydro storage. Pumps could be customized to as a broader concept. I think it's super interesting that it's pumped hydro storage has the best energy return on energy investment currently, if you can do it in a way that is actually benefiting the ecosystem and ensuring rainfall within your catchment area and developing forest. I think it's super interesting. Also having the ability to move. Sorry, guys. Are we still all good there? No, I've gotten rid of something. Can you still see my screen there? Okay. Having the ability to move water around on site is interesting. There may be an orographic effect. You may have a mountain or hills where there's a moisture condensing effect. Having the pump allows you to put water and regenerate on the windward side of the mountain range instead of the leeward side. And there can be a multiplying benefit there. The general features of the pump: it's simple, reliable, low tech, anti-fragile. Those who aren't familiar with the term antifragile, it's basically beyond just being resilient. It's something that gets even stronger with impact and disruption and benefit. The Bunyip pump's been around for 20 years. One of the pumps with a particular flow rate and fall and can pump to 750 meters elevation, 1,000 PSI. So compared to a ram pump, which has that hammer effect, the Bunyip pump is super soft. It has a soft push effect. So the pump lasts a lot longer and it can achieve these higher heads without being a really heavy lump. The pump is long-lived, can be serviced by the pump owner. It needs a minimum of 30 centimeters of fall and massive potential to change landscapes quite quickly, even to the extent that you want to be reducing the speed of rehydration because you want it to be a healthier rehydration. So 80% runoff can be changed to 100% infiltrated and pumped within the first year, depending on the size of the dams and swales and things like that. And that's compounding year on year. And with the understandings of how the biological drivers of climate, how ecosystems can change weather patterns and climate, it could be used from the interior of coast to bring moisture further and further inland. We've got some animations here, which I will share the link with you guys. You can check it out later, as well as the desert to rainforest that you've seen. There's what's meant by a 100-fold increase in infiltration time. There's a strategy for harvesting snowmelt, which we think would double usable water. Normally the ground's frozen and you can't infiltrate snowmelt easily, but with a particular setup, you can get gravity irrigation and harvest a lot of snowmelt. And again, compounding year on year, the exciting thing is how with the ecosystem or productive system express with that compounding and multiplying function. These are my co-founders. Ali in Pakistan is an engineer. Myra in Dubai is a longtime friend of Ali, and she's got fantastic finance and business experience. And I'm an earthworks and machine operator and other things in far north Queensland. Ali, my co-founder, writes Regenesis. It's fantastic because he's got a permaculture lens, he's got an engineering lens, and it's about quantifying the regeneration. So he does calculations on how much land is needed to be regenerated to restore the biotic pump, or often people will ask him, can you do calculations to mitigate the flooding that just happened in Valencia or Pakistan or other places like that? So he'll say what ecosystems are needed to mitigate those sorts of things. And also he looks, having an Earth systems thinking lens, he looks at all sorts of different elements from animals to fungi to atmospheric dynamics. So highly recommend that. That's a link and you guys can check it out later. So our progress so far, we're an Australian land regeneration company. We developed the evaporation activated valve. We established a collaboration with United Designers International. So they're involved with the Cyanide project and various other UN ones, and they're a fantastic design team. We're really looking to connect in with them. They're excited with what we're bringing, and we're excited with the fantastic experience and expertise that they've got. We're part of a joint proposal with the Eco Restoration Alliance for the Panama Canal watershed. As you may know, the Panama Canal's in recent years has had about half the water that it would ideally like, so global shipping has been halved. We've got manufacture and distribution arrangements with the Bunyip pumps, and we've been teaching in multiple climate and sustainability accelerator programs, and we've got interest from projects around the world. So we're still early stages and we're still proving out lots of these things, but they're also quite well established. In the pump's been around a long time. The earthworks methods are well tested by multiple projects. I call the maximum infiltration swale line contour, I call that modified keyline design, where you have this swale is both catchment and overflow away from the dam. So that's well tested on various projects. Some people might say, so you guys are unpowered, therefore you're suitable for developing countries. I see equal application in developed countries as well. You see the fires that happened in California recently. You see the challenges that the Colorado River has. You see the Murray-Darling in Australia also has lots of water shortages, drought or flood. I see broad application. I think just because developed countries may have infrastructure or capital at its disposal doesn't mean it should be thinking along those lines. I think there's massive potential in these ecosystems, self-replicating ecosystems. I had an interesting chat with a friend of mine, Mike, about grey and green infrastructure. And he was saying that with grey infrastructure, say a seawall or something like that, the best condition that grey infrastructure is in is on day one, whereas the best outcome or condition that green infrastructure is, just say it's mangroves or an ecosystem, that's the worst condition it's in is actually day one, because if it's stewarded in the right way and designed in the right way, it gets better and better and better. Well, that was super interesting. There's another practical engineering YouTube channel talking about all dams are temporary. There was a lot of dam building in the 20s and 30s. They're filled up with sediment. There isn't really a cost-effective way of desedimenting dams. So they're getting to a critical point where capacity is more and more reduced. And in the video, he was making the point that unlike a dam wall, where you put in a dam wall and get an outsized return from all the water that you can back up, removing sediment is you're just getting a one-for-one efficiency. So it's quite difficult. So on his YouTube channel, he was saying, we don't know how to address this. So if people have ideas, chime in, because there's a whole lot of dams that are reaching this point. So again, that's emphasizing self-replicating living systems rather than grey infrastructure. There's a reduced return. So for reducing or controlling sediment, think trees, forests, beavers, or manage grazing ruminants. So I really do see two paradigms here, two options. One is fighting nature, and one is nature. So for climate, you've got ongoing human and technological intervention and inputs, or you've got rehydrate and regenerate ecosystems that do their own thing and provide aerosols that give you that climate moderation that you're wanting. Carbon capture and storage machines, trees, soil. Desalination plants are promoted as the solution to water problems. They're expensive, energy intensive, and they produce a brine in the marine environment that's concentrated, that kills marine animals. And bore wells are also promoted as a solution. You need more water, dig a deeper well, put more bores in, but that's putting minerals and affecting pH balance and nutrient balances on the ground, and you have things like saltwater incursion. Instead, the opposite, or a different thinking, is changing the weather patterns through enhancement of ecosystems. For protein, one mindset is finding human innovation to address challenges like methane. The other paradigm is let's understand the ecological understandings of how pasture. Walter Yaney, this is a great short video of his. He talks about cattle on pasture, healthy animals. They have the methanotrophs, soil organisms, and a hydroxyl ion chemical reaction has 100-fold the capacity to mitigate any of the methane that the cattle produces. And also saw a fantastic interview with Vincent Gauci recently talking about trees uptaking methane, which was super surprising. So check that one out. Also, ruminants created the deepest topsoils in the world. So do we feed our livestock supplements or eat insects, or do we work with nature and have a deeper understanding. Aircon versus trees, or I think this is something that we still need to expand our horizons on, and that's centralized food systems with high input and getting materials and inputs from everywhere, having conservation of land somewhere, meeting all our needs from somewhere else, that where we're meeting our needs from gets exploited because we're not having this regenerative stewardship. And we end up with a moonscape. It looks like the moon, it's devoid of life. But there is working with living systems. We can get fertility everywhere, not just at this centralized hub. And sometimes these centralized productive systems, they're missing a key understanding of what food actually is. This is one of my favorite examples of the interconnectivity of everything. So the same organisms that change dirt into healthy, fertile soil are the same organisms in our gut microbe. They number between 1 to 1 with the cells in our body, up to 10 to 1 with the cells in our body. There's more of these organisms than there are cells in our body. So we literally are from the soil. We're like a host that just shows the interconnectivity. A lot of religious texts talk about this. We are literally from the soil. And this emphasizes the importance of growing healthy food organically, locally, with high nutrient to feed ourselves. And that shines a negative light on productivity that isn't doing this. So whether it's hydroponics or high input things that are trying to get the nutrient balances just right, where are all these organisms that we need that are us? Antifragility and risk. I think I mentioned earlier about Simon Michaud's research, which is super important. High-tech risk, we have an increasingly technological dependent world. There's centralization risk, cyber attack, specialized maintenance, resource intensive and complexity. Equally, one that I think will be growing in prominence is satellite risk. Satellite collisional cascade. As you know, there's a lot of satellites going into orbit currently, somewhere between 6,000 and 10,000 are currently in orbit. In 10 years' time, they estimate it'll be 70,000. Satellite collisional cascade, where you have a domino effect of a bit of debris or a satellite damaging another that destructs, damages another, damages another, would cripple modern society and potentially make certain orbits unusable. So that's super catastrophic stuff. That's something that a guy, Kessler, proposed some years ago, and he thought that the number above 72,000 satellites would be that number where there's that high risk. But we also have weapons in space. We have counter space weapons. The US, Russia, China, and India all have counter space weapons. And so that has the capability to pull other satellites out of orbit. And they also have anti-satellite weapons. They have missiles that can shoot down satellites. Russia shot down a satellite in 2022, and someone was saying that it increased the chances of satellite collisional cascade by 5%, that one missile destruction of an old defunct satellite. So I think it is important to consider this and not to have our food, water, transport, infrastructure entirely reliant on this. We need a lot more resilience. So I think that we're in an incredible time of tech. I don't deny that. I think that unpowered technology, accelerating ecosystems, and powerful technology need to be working together. I think that any project, companies, projects, developing countries, developed countries, I think they all need to be thinking along the lines of ecosystems and stability because of these risks that I've talked about. And I think we need to act and invest in ecosystem regeneration now. As I was saying, the point that we are in the climate space, the point that we are in fragility moving forward, emphasizing that money, gold, and Bitcoin have zero value on a dead planet. I think people need to appreciate that. So the key takeaways I'd like you guys to take away: multiplying and compounding ecosystems with no peak ecological function. What I mean by no peak ecological function is nature will self-replicate for improved conditions for life. So we place limits on how that would express, but we don't really know when you've got multipliers year on year. I think it's a unique combination when you have rapid regeneration and reduced risk in the same strategy. And inevitably, the speed of rehydration will be reduced to optimize for certain productivity or ecosystems, because you don't want everywhere to be a humid rainforest. You want more variability than that. Strategy is anti-fragile, decentralized, scalable, regenerative. It's equitable for people. There isn't a high-tech barrier and capital barrier. It's adaptable, and it's got an incredible energy return on energy invested. So keen to jump into questions and hear ideas and feedback. And we're keen for collaboration, project opportunities, funding and partnerships. We're at this early stage, but we really want to scale, and we think there's something really exciting here for the long term. We believe it can play a significant role potentially in helping to safely cool the planet through the case that I made today. So yeah, if you guys want to get in touch through VDAO or however you like. And thanks very much.
Well, that was a fantastic presentation, Steve. Thank you very much for that. If anybody has any questions, feel free to go ahead and unmute yourselves. Or if you're feeling a bit shy, you can also list any questions you might have in the chat, and we can pick those up. An initial question I have for Steve is, what sort of data are you looking for to make a determination on when is the best use case for a bunion pop or any other unpowered tech versus some other form of tech when it comes to ecosystem regeneration?
Mhm. Could you expand on that a little bit? I see it as a bit of a paradigm change, to tell you the truth. I think we often reach for the tech. So I think there's an enormous amount of application. A little bit of slope is necessary for the pump to work. But equally, I'll give you another scenario, getting a bit specific. So say there's a project site that you want to develop. Having the pump gives you the ability to catch water on one water catchment, store it in another, and move it to a third. So there might need to be a broader watershed understanding of when things are applicable or not. If that makes sense, there are so many potential possibilities that we do have to keep it fairly open-minded at this stage. In my view, the landscape and the potential of it are one of the smallest hurdles. People in policy and regulation are the big hurdles. So for those things to line up is the most important thing. The landscape regeneration is more simple.
Roger threw a question up on the chat there. Is PSKL a for-profit company? What possibilities do you see for Web3 DeFi funding?
We are a for-profit company. Yes, we would love to connect with Web3 people who are innovators in this space. They have expertise that we don't have. Funding is a major hurdle for us. It's limiting our scalability. We have people approach us, a lot of people from Africa, talking to them on different projects, and it's limiting in the time and capacity that we can do things and the impact that we can have. There's all sorts of creative funding models that Web3 blockchain folks are super good at. That's not our expertise. So we would love to connect and talk through these possibilities with people. Yeah. Any other elements to your question there? Is that what you're thinking about? Cost structure of product. Let's have a look. Cost structure of, yeah. Cost structure of producing your pumps. Currently, the pumps, there's not a whole lot of margin in it for the bunyip pump producers. They're manufactured in Australia from a fair bit of imported parts. So whether there's possibilities for 3D printing various components could be a cost saving. Freight is also a challenge we have. So I think there are efficiency gains that could really be helped there. It's a fairly small scale operation at the moment because there's limited application. It's in running streams. And in Australia, it doesn't have the scale that, say, the US does. We have a lot of desert in Australia. The pumps are sold internationally to the US and South America and places, but it's not in massive volumes. So the volume of pumps is also another challenge. For our input, we're focusing more on the design space because we don't have the capital.
I'm not sure if I'm the only one, but it seems that Steve may
Structure of
have
the pump.
paused.
Yeah, it froze on me too.
Yep, we
No,
we
you
lost
lost
you
me.
there for a minute, Steve.
Oh,
When you were
there you
talking
go.
about not having the capital, so you've been focusing on the design space. Could you double click on that again?
Sure. Talking about the mass production of pumps, basically. So we are open to options. We don't necessarily have a good strategy, ideal strategy moving forward for that. So ideas and collaboration and partnerships, we're open to all those possibilities.
Yeah, one thing I'm also curious to know is what other sort of unpowered tech do you see that's being effective at either, helping with water cycles and water systems like slowing, slinking, and spreading in the water, or other maybe technologies that you're seeing that are effective for different various use cases, like accelerating food forest growth or yeah, other.
Mhm. Definitely, my emphasis is on water, having that potential for, just say instead of dragging a ripper through somewhere, I'd prefer to have living roots to it. So the emphasis on rehydration, so you get water decompacting the ground instead. Apart from having water and unpowered tech, my preference is not to go with machines much. I like the initial machinery and earthworks and then not ongoing. So apart from that, I would probably go fairly basic, things like a broad fork or other aspects on a large scale just to decompact and develop a food forest. I do have a little bit of input on irrigating and mulching an area is super effective in improving soil. So instead of cultivating something, I would look at mulching, irrigating, composting. Yeah, that goes a long way, minimizing time, labor, and energy inputs, particularly on the larger scale. Yeah, definitely having the soil covered. You don't want to be cultivating or ripping land every couple of years. Was there any aspects of the thesis that I laid out that you thought were weak or what resonated, what didn't, in combining those different elements? I know it's quite idealized and those sorts of aspects, but yeah, what was the weakest point you guys thought?
Could you maybe bring up that slide again if you have it available?
Which one?
of the thesis. I think, or at least it was really early on in the presentation. I think
Sure.
it had 8 factors to it, and
So what is the main topic? Let me put this slideshow in the chat.
oh, perfect. Thank you.
Um, so the thesis was that unpowered technology can play a significant role in our future. And I was sort of um, laying out the case of why I think there's major challenges elsewhere uh, is part of it, and then pointing out the self-replicating aspect of nature and the longevity of it. So that's that. Yeah, please have a look. There's some really interesting links. Simon Michaud's research and other aspects as well. Or anything that you would add to it, so ideas that popped into your head that thought, oh yeah, that looks relevant to this other aspect.
I thought one of the more compelling parts of your presentation was talking about how this ties in with kind of the macro efforts at creating irrigation and creating capacity for fire service mitigation. I know we're having a lot of conversations now with LA burning down about needing to restore wetlands and creating fire mitigation efforts proactively in order to prevent kind of the advancing deadwood that we've got throughout our system from basically turning us into a giant fire swale. Um, I'm curious about I've heard some other non-powered technologies that are hydrophilic, in particular VRM Biologic out of Australia. Have you heard of them?
I have, yep.
Do you see commonalities between your approach and theirs? I see potentially you're talking about developing the swales and creating the catchment systems, and that to me seems really well aligned with the hydrophilic nature of the fungus that they use and how they're basically using this soil as a water amendment, as a water attractant into the system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my co-founder just did a bit of a write-up on it. You can correct my understanding, Shannon, but my understanding from talking to Ali was something like they have a bacterial input and it's producing water in the soil. Is that something right? Or is it a fungal thing that's attracting water? But my understanding was it is actually producing water somehow. Is that right?
Yeah. So what they basically did is they figured out how to harness a hydrophilic fungus along with a photosynthesizing bacteria. And the bacteria does photosynthesis underground. It uses IR and other non-visible light spectrums to be able to harness that energy. And then the fungus essentially attracts water into the soil. And when you create the process, like typically with composting, you burn off about 60 to 70% of the materials, and you're literally creating a burn process and releasing a lot of methane, CO2 emissions, all of that into the atmosphere. And the humus soil production process basically takes that same materials and it inoculates it with this substrate, with this application material, and it goes through and it converts everything into good topsoil, and it's all hydrophilic. And so when you put it on as an amendment on the soil, it actually amends everything you put it on, and it creates a beneficial spiral action in the soil to be able to help regenerate the entire space that you're applying it to.
Mm-hmm.
And that I've seen some case studies where they're putting this stuff directly onto sand in the Gobi Desert, and it's doing like multiple generations of perennial growth with no rainfall and no irrigation, where it's literally just providing the water from the atmosphere. It's pretty crazy.
Wow. Wow. And that's fungus originated from somewhere? It's native to somewhere? Or are they modified something?
No, it's native. It's 100% millions of years of adaptation. They basically selected certain bacteria and certain funguses that work well in this application, and they put them together in a way that makes a lot of sense. From what I understand, they're operating in 32 countries and counting right now.
Yeah, cool. Well, a few people that I think of very highly are excited by it. So must show great promise, which is good.
Right on.
Hey,
Well,
Mike, how's it going?
I am doing well. Apologies for being late. My last meeting ran quite late and my webcam broke, so you just got to look at I don't even know what's showing there, but good to see everybody. Thank you.
No worries. Yeah, we just did the presentation and we're just getting a bit of feedback. And I put the slideshow in the chat if you want to have a look at it. It's got lots of fascinating links. And I mentioned talking about grey and green infrastructure. You know, that example you gave me the other day, Mike, talking about grey infrastructure peaking on day one and ecosystems being at their worst. So I thought that was a great insight. So I shared that
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, not my original one. I forget who I stole that from, but you're welcome to steal it as well. That
Already stolen. Yep.
I know there was a little chat about the cost of these pumps, but if I wanted to purchase, I'm in Canada here. If I wanted to purchase one or daisy chain a handful, five of them together, what would that cost to get it over here? And I'm also curious, I guess it's a sub question, are the designs open sourced or do you license out to produce in other places around the world to be able to get these in the hands of other folks?
Mhm. It's not open source. It's not patented either. So the guys who make it, they're just fantastic, genuine people. So it's a lot of trust and genuine relationship that we have with them and they have with their customers. So if sort of in their words, in their world, if they think someone's dodgy or they don't like how they operate, they won't deal with them. Um, In relation to cost, I think there was another element to your question as well, apart from cost. Sorry, open source. What else was it?
Just about licensing, if there was availability to
Licensing.
develop it
Uh,
elsewhere. But you kind of answered it in the first one. It seems like if there were the right people doing with the right intention, they would might be open to it.
there's a guy dabbling in Canada, and we've had some other Canadians inquiring about it, excited about it as well. So hopefully that'll develop. Um, if not, pumps can come from elsewhere to you. I would say, as a generalization, there's different size pumps. I think on a broader landscape, you'd be looking towards the larger one. I think you could say that would probably be around 3,500 Australian plus freight
Mhm.
for a pump. And to give you a gauge on that capability, I think that the input could be about 15 liters a second, and that would probably put some from a fall of, say, 6 meters, it would put something like 35,000 liters to 30 meters head, something along those lines, just to give you a
Wow.
gauge on that pump size per day, with probably about 15, maybe as much as 20% pumped and 80% discharged. So the discharged water powers the pump and that other amount is pumped. So Canada's got lots of flowing water, so it can be advantageous for you guys, the normal application, or if you want to do it, use it for snow melt. Yeah.
Thank you. And the discharge, can that be used for aeration of water?
Yeah, I'd say it could. I can share a video. Let me put the Bunyip pump side up for you guys. And it'll just give you a gauge of what it looks like in action. Um,
Are there any big constraints with the pump or like applications that you just wouldn't want to employ it out in the field with?
my view is that the smaller for the applications. Oh, sorry, Sharon.
Don't have to
Um,
double task if you don't want to.
I'm a simple man.
I am too.
Um, um, my view is that the smaller the site, the less value there is in the applications that we're talking about. A running stream would be fantastic to supply a small homestead, but I think anything with a catchment of, say, less than 5 acres or something, the bigger the better, really, for the applications we're talking about, rehydration at scale. And the bigger the landscape, the better the benefit. An interesting aspect is that swales, because you have that water dam reservoir going up and down, where you have a prolonged wet season, you can have swales much longer than would normally make sense, because otherwise you just have heaps of water going over the spillway.
Mm.
So that's interesting. It can be a lot broader catchment and a lot broader infiltration as well. That second swale can infiltrate a lot. We did a conceptual design, like I mentioned, for the weather makers, and Mike's involved with United Designers and the weather makers, and in the North Sinai, and within the existing design, we generalized that it could be a 500% increase in water availability per unit area. So when you have a volume of water, you can just prolong that time so much in an optimized way. So that's why things get exciting.
Certainly. Yeah, I could see a lot of application in reforestation projects
Absolutely.
all around.
Yeah, and just touching on that, and what Shannon was talking about, fire services are throwing more and more funding at fires, but if it hasn't worked now, how is that going to work into the future? So rehydration and the changing of weather patterns. Changing of weather patterns is the broader thing. Rehydration and fungi breaking down the fire fuel load and raising groundwater, that's the solution, really,
Mhm.
the long-term solution, because when plants are stressed by pest and disease, they're extremely tall matchsticks waiting to go up when they die, and it's super, super dangerous, as you would know in Canada. Yikes, those
Certainly.
fires are absolutely scary. And to the extent that the fire can exist under the snow over winter, that really blew my mind and popped up again the next summer.
Mhm.
Wow.
We see it all the time in our big forested regions where there's a lot of territory that goes unchecked, and we've interrupted watersheds in so many ways that we've augmented them now. And so there's a lot of strategies that need to be employed, considered, and thought about to be able to potentially implement. Where are you? Are you typically doing? I think you said that you were mostly focusing on design work with PSKL. Are you focusing in a particular region, or are you working across the globe? How does that work?
Yeah, we're talking to people across the globe. Early days yet. Yeah, we're really keen to scale and can especially work with United Designers or Fifth World or Permaculture Canada or all these folks that have established operations and the expertise just to slot this sort of thing into their strategy, into a broader suite. It doesn't replace everything. Like every good designer, you understand the volume of tools at your disposal. I think also there's a bit of a narrative that you look at a landscape and it'll tell you what it wants to be. That's the current regenerative permaculture design mindset. But I think we can broaden that. I think we can say this could change relatively quickly. What could it be? Let's experiment. So I think that's an exciting option.
Completely agree.
Keen
Yeah,
to work with anyone, keen to collaborate, keen for partnerships.
amazing. Well, this is, I'm very happy to have made the connection. Glad to show up.
Awesome.
Mm.
Steve, I have a couple of questions. My first question is, I gotta look at my notes. You mentioned that there was challenges around policy and regulation, so I just wanted to hear a little bit more about that. And also a thought. So I'm in a few DPIN groups, decentralized physical infrastructure network, and so
Yeah.
has anything been done with this product or with this concept around hackathons?
No, it sounds super interesting though. I think we could really strengthen the case and with insights and networks that you have, that sounds super interesting in the evolving space of DeepIn. And I think longevity and the reduced risk element can really be sold quite well for a strategy like this. So yeah, happy to explore that. In terms of regulation, I'll give you an example in Australia for a strategy, natural sequence farming. So that's a spread it and soak it over a floodplain strategy. Some similarities to keyline design, another strategy. They're doing fantastic work rehydrating land in Australia that has fire wipe out all the other neighbours and significant drought and fire regularly. And they face, water bodies have significant regulation and they should be regulated so people don't do the wrong thing. But at the same time, these natural sequence farmer practitioners are facing years of regulation and hundreds of thousands in fees for work that benefits the whole area and benefits the water body and broader landscape. So it'd be great if there were, proactive governments. I don't think it's worth battling uphill. I think you really need to go where the momentum is. And if there's resistance at all, I think you just focus on something else, in my view, because you can't fight those battles if you don't have the means to, have it prolonged for a long time.
True, and you don't want to get caught up in the bureaucracy of fighting the battle when you're actually trying to make an improvement in an ecosystem that badly needs improvement. Thank you.
Absolutely. Also, local people buy-in is super important. So consultation with people, you need them to be extremely enthusiastic for the project and to have ownership of it. Otherwise, you're not going to succeed either. So there's a couple of elements that need to be very strong in order to pursue something.
Yeah, quick question, Steve. Curious about what sort of data you would like to see, or other people you might think other people would like to see gathered after deployment of these bunion pumps in different regions that would help strengthen the case for their use and kind of highlight the impact that they've had on the surrounding areas. I always see as data being a very important thing to kind of make that whole thing come full circle so that people can get an understanding of what the actual outcomes were. And a lot of like project investors and such really look for this sort of data. What do you think would be the best data to use?
I see a business case and a niche for proving out how much you improve the water cycle and, say, change weather patterns, biotic pump effect, etc., which is difficult to do, but you could probably, if you can make that case sufficiently, I think you can go to water-intensive companies, let's say data centers, manufacturer, etc. Say, this is how much water you're using. To mitigate this, you can do this work to be justified and improve branding and public perception that you're actually doing beyond your water use. You're contributing more than that. So I think there's an interesting case there. There's certainly plenty of funds in that direction if you can have the data sufficient to quantify the improvement in the water cycle.
I'm just realizing that we're, kind of coming close to the time here. And if anybody else had any questions, feel free again to continue unmuting yourselves or sharing any questions or comments in the chat. But yeah, we'll give it another minute or so. But in the meantime, I just want to say, Steve, it's been a real honor having you here again, joining us for a second time, and maybe another one in the future to continue this conversation. I think it's really important to dive into just how complex the water cycles are and how our understanding of them is just I think we're still just scratching the surface. And yeah, so would be interested in continuing that conversation.
Yeah, I think that as these realities hit moving forward, people are going to be turning more and more to nature, and strategies and paradigms like this will become increasingly important.
Fully agree.
Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate that. Please reach out. And if you have any more ideas or thoughts, yeah, please email me. I'll put my email in the chat. And fantastic to hear from everyone.
Thanks so much,
Thanks,
Steve.
Steve. I was just about to ask for your email because I'm wondering too, I know you guys are in like the early stages, but have you reached out to the World Water Council or Nature Conservatory?
To an extent, I think our main emphasis is connecting with regeneration companies, getting some results on the ground, and then I think things will flow very quickly.
So regeneration companies first, and then okay, got it.
I think that would be the ideal one, because you do get to a point where we'll say, yes, this pump exists, yes, this earthwork exists, but prove to me that they can work together, which seems very logical to me. It doesn't take much imagination there. I do have some people, particularly in non-brittle climates, people who have enough water. They say, this is all well and good, but prove that more water would be beneficial for the landscape. And I'm like, oh, really? That's very self-evident to me in a drought, fire, flood environment. That being said, some sites demonstrating things would be fantastic. If you have networks or contacts that you think would be beneficial, warm introductions are fantastic. You know, these guys have this simple idea that is exciting. Warm introductions are much appreciated.
Any other direct asks that you have from anybody here or Fifth World? Like you could mention collaboration or warm introductions.
Definitely, all those things. I think Fifth World's a super exciting space and VDAO, where lots of these things convene. So I think there's massive potential. This is why I was keen to get feedback and input from you guys, because you're passionate and well informed on these subjects. I think it's through collaboration that things will be possible. Let's keep in touch, everyone, and let these ideas ferment and ruminate on them and act on them, because we do need to act on them now as well. So I think someone mentioned funding mechanisms earlier as well, and whether that's through blockchain or other innovative ideas, I'm super open to that. It's certainly a major hurdle for us. And something we didn't touch on much, but incentive to adopt is key. And I see this is probably a bit of a longer discussion, but nailing that incentive and that pitch that can be for climate people, or it can be for agricultural productions looking to boost profit margin or fire mitigation. I think if we really nail that, it should be why wouldn't we do this? Because it has so many benefits. Yeah. Well, thanks, everyone. Much appreciate your time and expertise.
Yeah, thank you everybody for showing up. Tune in to, I believe it's going to be next week. We have our community call. Actually, that might be this week, actually. Our community call on, I believe, Thursday. And then on Friday, there may be some other event that's going to be coming up. Keep your eyes peeled for any announcements around that. And then next week on the 25th, there will be a AI power and regeneration discussion taking place in another P2P learning event. So check out the Discord for links to that. Also are on our Twitter and the Luma link that I shared with everybody here earlier today. Steve, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to be here with us and really digging into this stuff and fielding all sorts of questions. Really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody. Cheers.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.